Welcome to the Costa Property Podcast, the podcast that turns your dreams of owning a piece of paradise on the Costa del Sol into reality. I'm Warner Laurie, and I'm joined by my co-host and wife, Sandra Laurie.
Join us as we embark on navigating the ins and outs of real estate and relocation to this beautiful region.
We're not just about market trends, we're about sharing real-life experiences, because we know the struggle firsthand, and I've helped many people navigate this challenge also.
If you're dreaming of your perfect Costa del Sol home and want to get real, no-frills, expert advice, then you're absolutely in the right place. Join us each week as we share honest insights and information that will guide your journey. So a question that I always get asked is, how much do I really need to live there every month? And the truth is, the answer is really different for everybody. If you're a single person living here, your costs will be very, very different to compared to if you're a family of 4 with your kids going to private schools. And it also really depends on the type of lifestyle that you want to have once you reach your destination on the Costa del Sol. So in this episode, I'm going to break down the day-to-day cost of living here on the Costa del Sol, things like groceries, utility bills, schools, healthcare, and lifestyle extras. So by the end of this episode, you will know exactly what you can expect when it comes to budgeting for your monthly costs here on the Costa del Sol. So, why is this important? Why are your costs important? In my experience, this is really an area that people can get caught out on, and it's often an area that trips them up. They always plan for the obvious things, like their household costs, like their utility costs, but they often don't plan correctly when it comes to things like their lifestyle costs. And suddenly they get really surprised when things like groceries, utility bills, or even schools fees start to add up and their costs become a lot more expensive than they initially thought. Now, I always say that your lifestyle really determines your budget more than anything else. So let's start with the basics. Utilities and basics. Your monthly costs, your monthly living costs, your quarterly living costs. Day to day, your utilities will probably run around 100 to 200 a month if you're a single person. Now that will cover things like your electricity, your water, and it'll be higher in summer months as well. You need to take that into consideration, especially if you're running aircon a lot, but I'll come back to that a little bit in a minute and tell you more about my own aircon experience over the course of this summer. So electricity costs on a 1-bedroom apartment, let's use that as an example for a second, will typically cost you between 75 and 90 euro per calendar month. Now, water costs are also something that you need to think about, but water costs can sometimes be included in your community fees depending on where you live and the type of property that you have. So water costs that you need to think about, it's usually a quarterly cost, but you need to budget for that as well, a little bit similar to the cost of the electric. Now, you also need to think about internet. So internet at the moment, in my own experience, for my own internet costs, you're looking at between 35 and 50 euro a month, depending on, what type of package that you have. And then also on top of that, we need to consider the cost for mobile phone expenses. So my own cost for my mobile phone at the moment is 15 euro a month. So all in all, those type of costs kind of give us the range that we need to consider when it comes to your monthly utility expenses. Now, if you're living in a community, which you've heard me mention before, and you have shared facilities like a pool or a garden, you'll also want to budget for your community fees cost. Now, the better the features in your community, the better the benefits that you have will determine the cost that you pay in community fees. So if you have, for example, an apartment in a community with a nice pool and a garden, you might be talking anywhere in the range of 100 to 200 euro a month. Now, if you're going super high spec and your community is going to include things like co-working spaces and a gymnasium for you to use, you can expect that your community costs are going to be higher to, offset the running cost of that facility in your development. Now, often as well, we can see that they can even be lower than that. cost. Specifically, if you're picking a community that maybe doesn't have a swimming pool, for example, your costs will be lower. Why? Because the running costs will be lower in that particular community. So these are things to think about as well when it comes to building your budget. But just one fact here on utilities that I want you to think about is if we use the example of London, you can expect that your household bills are going to be between 20 and 30% lower per month than what you're paying in London. Now, I mentioned about aircon costs later, and when we look at utility bills and budgeting for utility bills and basics here in Spain, particularly here on the Costa del Sol, you need to allow for the fact that over the course of the summer months, your utility costs, like electricity, will increase. Now, why is that? The probability is that you're going to be using your electricity more over the summer period, particularly in the key summer months like July and August. It's very likely that you're going to have your air conditioning on over those months because, let's be frank, it's really hot. Now, so it's a little bit like in reverse. If you're coming from a colder country, you budget for your utility costs to go up in the winter months because you're cold. So in Spain, you're going to budget for them to go up in the summer months because you're too hot. Now, this month, in my own experience, I was left with a little bit of a surprise when our electricity bills were coming in July and now August. We had a lot of guests over the summer period, and guests don't always tend to respect that at some point the air conditioning needs to be turned off. Now, what did we find over the course of the summer? That our electricity bill increased by €150 per month because we had a lot of guests over the summer period using the electricity to cool themselves down. Now, I'm not saying that yours is going to increase at that same price, but it is important just to budget that into your living expenses or just have a really upfront chat with your guests, not to abuse the air conditioning when they're staying in your house over the summer period. As well, to think about when it comes to your household costs and the type of costs that you need to budget for. If you have a standalone property, for example, if you're living in a standalone villa, it's very likely that you're going to have a garden and even your own pool. Now, there will be some maintenance costs that you need to consider with having those features in your property. So a gardener, for example, will cost you about €150 per month, and the gardener will come to your property likely weekly, maintain your grass, check that, if you've sprinklers that they are on, and set up and optimize correctly, and also check that your pool is healthy and the hygiene levels are good in your pool for people to use. So as I mentioned, my own cost with that, because we have our own pool and garden, we pay €150 per month. And that means that the gardener comes out weekly, which is amazing, and checks everything for us, cuts the grass, makes sure that the grass has enough water, and just keeps everything ticking over nicely. I am not green fingers, so this in my life is very important that we have a gardener that comes and maintains that. If you are green fingers and you're good with gardening and all of those type of jobs in the house, then maybe you don't need that cost and you don't need to budget for it. But in my house, that is absolutely a priority that we need to have. So something else that I want to talk about in this particular episode when we're talking about costs. So we've talked about utilities and, basic household costs. I also want to touch on groceries. So, food and other household costs. So what do you need to think about when it comes to groceries and other household costs? And what could those other household costs be? If you're a single person without a family and your focus is just feeding yourself and your own supermarket shop, I would be budgeting up to about €300 a month for this. Like in other countries and like what's being reported around the world at the moment, Spain has experienced increased food prices, definitely in the last number of months. And I can certainly see the cost in my weekly supermarket shop as well. So it's important to call that out. Yes, you may be able to spend less, but in my experience, budgeting for that will give you what you need, I would say. Now, I think if you're a family, so if I use my own family, for example, we are a family of 4 with a teenager and an almost teenager in the house. Snacking is an hourly occurrence. And, our weekly grocery shop will come to anything between €150 a week, or this week when the kids have been back to school and I've been stocking up on extra snacks and things for lunches, €208 a week our household shop came to this week. Now, that usually supports me for our full week, family of 4, lunches for the kids, snacks, and kind of everything they need to keep them fueled up between hobbies and life. And we're normally cooking at home Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and one day over the weekend. And then we like to have like a family meal out over the weekend when we can. So that's usually covering that. Now, of course, we may need to have the weekly top-up shop in the middle of the week to get some fresh groceries and vegetables and some extra meat if that's the way the week is going. So we would need to take that into consideration as well. But I do always notice when I go back to Ireland, or recently I spent some time in Scotland over the summer period, I was really shocked at how expensive the food shopping was in the UK. So even though, as I mentioned, Spain has experienced increased food prices over the last number of months, and it's a regular topic of conversation for me in mums groups and in different forums, etc., it's still cheaper than what I would have experienced in the UK. So it's important to call that out as well. So single person, allow yourself up to €300 a month. Family, as I said, we're talking between €150 to €200 a week for the heavy stuff. So taking that into consideration as well. So that'll give you a sense of what you can experience. But again, like we talked about with utilities, your costs are going to be about 20 to 30% cheaper than what you're experiencing maybe right now in London or in the UK. So it is cheaper than other countries, but it's important to reflect the correct spend in your budget as well. And I think as well, overall, it's the quality of the goods here. They're fresher. The fruit and veg is a lot fresher, larger quantities than what I have experienced in other countries, particularly lately. Now, as well as that, like if you're a fan of, browsing around the local greengrocers, or you want to go to the local butchers or to the local fish market, you will get great value for money in these places as well. And it's worth it taking the time to take some time out in your week if you have the opportunity to do so, and pick up some shopping in these type of destinations and menus too. The quality is definitely going to be better. And also an added bonus is you'll get to practice your Spanish because you'll be engaging in the local community as well. So you have a great opportunity to do that. Let's think about lifestyle. So if we were to think a little bit about lifestyle, what am I talking about here? I'm talking about maybe eating out. I'm talking about hobbies that you might have in terms of, are you a golfer? Are you a hiker? What do you like to do in your free time? So these are different things that you need to take into consideration in your budget as well. But let's start with an important one, eating out. Okay, so it is really, really possible to do this on a budget, and it is really possible to do this well in a cost-effective way. But if you're moving to Spain for the first time, it's very important to call out up front that there is a trap that you may fall into, and that is the holiday mode. So you're moving over, you're adjusting to your life in your new country, you're integrating, you're making new communities, new social groups. The trap is that it's very easy to find yourself eating out more normally than usual than you would in your home country. The weather's good. You want to be outside. You want to be enjoying a glass of wine in your new community. But those extra, let's call them excursions, they can have an impact on your pocket. And people will often say to me, oh, Sandra, it's definitely not as cheap as I imagined. I expected to, be spending a lot less eating out and drinking out. My question back to you will be, well, how frequently are you doing this? Are you doing this in the same frequency that you were back home, i.e. once a week? Or are you out every second day? Well, then naturally the cost is going to impact your budget, and it's just something to take into consideration. And if you find that you're left maybe with a little bit less disposable income than you planned for at the end of the month, maybe look at your habits. How frequently are you eating out? How frequently are you socializing? And I want you to do all of those things. Of course I do. That's why you've moved to Spain in the first place. But I want you to be realistic in terms of how much is your budget going to allow before it starts to impact the quality of the life that you're going to have here. Now, you can still definitely enjoy eating out in Spain and enjoying a, menú del día, 3-course meal, in a really cost-effective way, paying between 15 and 20 euro if you're eating in the right places, if you're eating in the more local venues, in local towns. In Benalmádena, for example, if you're going to eat in Arroyo de la Miel, you can definitely find great value. But if you're going to go to the more tourist-centric places that are, promoting for tourists or people that are on vacation, you're going to expect to pay a premium. Okay, you're going to pay a higher price. If in Benalmádena, for example, if you're familiar with the area and you go to the marina, the prices there in the restaurants are higher than what you would expect to pay in other places that you eat. So the takeaway from that is if you're going to eat out and you want to do it frequently, stay local, stay in local restaurants, eat where locals are eating, because that's going to allow you to do it in a much more affordable way and likely in a way that's really nice with great quality as well. So some food for thought as we think about food. Another area that I want to talk about as well, particularly if you are sitting down, putting pen to paper, thinking about your costs and your budget when you come to Spain, is let's talk about schools and kids. For families, you've heard me say this a lot, schools are a really big consideration. Public schools are free, private schools are not, and you need to figure out what's right for your family and right for your kids when you're making that decision. 2 things to bear in mind here if you are making the decision when it comes to public versus private school or fee-paying school. Number 1, the age of your child. That's so important. If your child is older and they haven't had Spanish education before, or they've not learned the language, it may be tricky to integrate them into Spanish public school. Not impossible, but it will require a lot more time and support for you as a parent. And you need to ask yourself honestly, if you have that time, if you've got your own career when you come to Spain, you may not have the support to give your child to make that integration easy. So that's important. Now, also the second question, how long are you planning on staying in Spain? Okay, so if you have a job that requires you to move around every 3 to 5 years, and you know that Spain is not your final destination, you need to look ahead and think about your kids in the sense that, do they need certain type of curriculum qualifications to take to their next destination with them? Okay, that's going to be very important for you as you choose the right education option for your family. But in choosing the right education option for your family, it's important to think about costs. So Spanish public school, you will have the usual costs like supplies and books and, extracurricular activities. But private school or international school is fee paying over here. Now, I will say it's significantly lower cost than what I have experienced in private schools in other countries. It is more affordable compared to other countries, particularly in the UK, for example. But it's a cost that you will need to think about up front when you're doing your budget, particularly if you have more than one child. Now, I had this conversation with a client the other day, and I think this is a great point to put in here. If you're a family of 2 or 3 kids, and the kids are of different ages, the same education route may not necessarily be the right route for all of those kids. What do I mean by that? So if you've got a younger child, okay, it may be a great opportunity to put them into public school, integrate them, get them learning the language, get them integrated really well. If you've got an older child, that mightn't be the right route for them. And you might say, okay, we're going to put this child into international school. We're going to put the younger kids into Spanish public school because that suits us. That's also going to impact your costs significantly as well from a budgeting exercise. And I think it's just something to really think about as part of the planning for what's right for you and what's right for your family. When you've got kids as well, I think it's important to think about extracurricular costs. So hobbies, you're going to have a monthly cost associated with that. So it's important to think about that. Like in my own house, I have 2 kids, very different in their likes and dislikes. So their hobbies are naturally very different. I can share with you that for one of my kids, I pay €37 a month for their extracurricular. And for another child, I pay closer to €100 a month because there's two hobbies. So, just ballpark figures that you might want to put into your budget if you do have children and they're sociable and they're trying to carve out their own life once they move to Spain. It's important to factor that in. Now, when it comes then to activities that you're going to maybe do as a family at the weekends, yeah, of course, in winter, you might do your cinema trips. You might do your trips to the local restaurants and the shopping centres. But, there's also a really great opportunity to keep these costs low. Why? Because the weather is good. So you've got an opportunity to pack up a picnic basket and go to the beach. That's free. So you can impact your costs as well as a family in a really nice and realistic way as well, which is important to think about because you've probably not had that opportunity before based on where you're travelling from. Why? Because the weather's probably rubbish, right? So good food for thought with that there as well. Now, public healthcare is excellent in Spain if you are a resident and paying into the social security system. Now, if you're getting your visas and you're going through the visa process, it's likely that you're already familiar with the fact that you're going to need private health insurance. Private health insurance is great here in Spain. We have the option of both. So we have public because we live in Spain and pay into the social security system. But also we choose to keep private because my son has some severe health conditions, and it just means that we're not waiting for appointments and we can, normally get expedited through the healthcare system due to some support that he needs. Now, for a family of 4, we pay €220 a month for our private healthcare, which massively serves us as a family due to my son's needs. But that's not necessary. If you are living in Spain, working in Spain, paying into the social security system, you can avail of excellent healthcare here through the public system. But again, it's about what's finding the options that are best for you and your family moving forward. So, lots to think about. Lots to think about when it comes to budgeting, lots to think about when it comes to costs, loads to take into consideration when you are doing your household budget. And when you are considering about, choices that are potentially right for you as an individual or as a family moving forward. And an important priority for me in my house is wine is cheaper. I love a good glass of wine. I love to socialise with my friends over a good glass of wine. And, one massive advantage is that you can get great Spanish wine here on a shoestring compared to what you're potentially paying right now in your home country. So, there you have it, a real picture of what life here costs you once you've actually made the move. And remember, these are just examples. Your numbers will really depend on your personal circumstances and your choices as a family, and also the different type of lifestyle that you want to have once you move to the Costa del Sol. Now, if you're enjoying this podcast, it would mean the world to us if you could leave a rating or review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps more people find the show. And don't forget to click follow so that you never, ever miss an episode. And that way we can keep bringing you tips, insights, and real stories that you need to plan when you're thinking about your big move to Spain so that you can do that with confidence. Thank you for stopping by. Thank you so much for listening into today's episode on the Costa Property Podcast. Another fantastic episode learning about the highs and lows of relocating to the Costa del Sol from real people who have been through the journey themselves, and of course our wonderful experts. If you have been enjoying the show so far, remember to hit subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating or review.
We absolutely love hearing your thoughts. Please send any questions that you would like us to answer on the show to warner@wlcostaproperties.net. Or you can pop us a message on our socials, which are in the show notes. Remember, you can also visit the website www.wlcostaproperties.net.
See you on the next episode, and bye for now.
Bye-bye.